Everybody has an opinion on what you should be when you grow up. And while a lot of those things come from good places, a lot of it also comes from people that haven't stepped into their higher selves. It's something you have to avoid. You have to be able to sit back and say, all of these things that I believed about myself, all of these stories I told myself, they came from somewhere. And if it's not that inner voice, if it's not that higher power or whatever you happen to believe in, it's not what you should be doing with your life.
Welcome to the Thriving After Divorce podcast, where you learn the secrets to reclaim your life and turn your breakup into your breakthrough. Transformation expert, internationally published author, and online show host Tanya Marie Dubé will help you quickly pick up and move on as you tune into interviews with some pretty cool experts from around the world, showing you how to live your best life after divorce. If you're ready to learn the skills to finally put your divorce behind you for good, dig down really deep, and step into your highest self, then you're in the right place. Here's your host, online educator and mom of two, Tanya Marie Dubé.
Hi, everybody. It's Monday. How was your weekend? I am so happy that you're here with me again today. Thank you so much for coming back. I'd like to remind everybody to please like, comment, subscribe, share, and review this podcast. With my online video series, we reached over 300,000 women all over the world. And my goal with this podcast is to reach 1 million women globally. So with your help, I know we can do this, because when you teach a woman, you teach an entire community, and the love just spreads. So please share this with your community and let's reach this goal together. So today's interview is with Sheryl Green. She is a keynote speaker, author, writing coach, and animal rescuing badass. After a devastating divorce, she's discovered the power of story. She now works with organizations and individuals to harness the power of their story in business and life. Sheryl's the author of Surviving to Thriving, How to Overcome Setbacks and Rock Your Life, and Once Upon a Bottom Line, Harnessing the Power of Storytelling in Sales. She also serves as the Director of Communications and Cuddling for Hearts Alive Village Animal Rescue. So in our episode today, Sheryl tells us all about her harrowing split from her ex-husband, and she tells us how she dug herself out of the shock, the humiliation, and the grief of what happened to her and what she did to turn her life around. She teaches us how to take back control of our lives after trauma so that we can face our new normal, each of our new identities, and all of our dreams and goals that we put on hold, and start over from the ground up. I'm very happy to do this interview today and can't wait for all of you to meet Sheryl. So let's welcome Sheryl. Hi, Sheryl. I am so happy to have you here. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy. It's been a long time in the making, hasn't it?
Yes. A couple of months now, I think we're at.
A couple of months. Okay, so let's just jump right in. So we're going to start with what you do and who you serve.
Sure. So I am a storyteller. I realized a couple of years ago that if there's anything I'm really good at, it's crafting a story. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. Sometimes we tell ourselves stories that we shouldn't. But I've used it to work with businesses and organizations to kind of explain what they do and how they help people. Mm-hmm. And I actually use it in my own life, but I'm a board member and director of communications and cuddling for an animal rescue.
And cuddling, that's very
cute. Yeah. It's a difficult job, but somebody's got to do it. So I really, I use the power of story to bring businesses and individuals to life.
That's amazing. I love that. Give me an example of how you'd use story to help somebody through their divorce, for example.
You know what? I'll give you an example. Actually, this wasn't divorce. This was health. Okay. I have told myself for years that I am not a gym person. I made up this whole story about how I hated working out and I hated being in gyms. And I will be perfectly honest, I judged people that went to gyms and spent their lives there. And then last year, I signed up for Scale the Strat, which I'm actually doing again this year. And that's walking up 108 stories of 1,455 steps. And by walking, I mean dragging my butt up. So, so I needed to start working out. And eventually I made my way to a gym. And I found out that that was just a story I was telling myself. So I love it. Absolutely love it. So I encourage people to really, identify those stories that they're telling themselves. And really, most of the time, they're lies. And they've either crafted them themselves or somebody else has told them these stories. And they just kind of adopted them as their own.
And now using this in the space of divorce and separation, we can see how we can get ourselves really stuck in a bad relationship for a very long time.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially I think when you're in a relationship, you kind of feel like you need to be there. You need that person. You can't live without them. And I know I felt like that before my divorce. I thought I would die without him. I really did. And I didn't. I came stronger. So just realizing how strong you are and rewriting that personal, like internal story that you've got, that you can stand on your own.
Wow, yeah, I love that. It's true. We're still alive. We thought the worst was going to happen if we ventured out into the unknown. Really, the worst. Like you really do feel, I think that fight or flight kicks in because you feel like you could possibly die. And then you look back on it years later and you're like, wow, I really did tell myself a whopper of a story that screwed me up a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So now, you've been through separation and divorce. It got really hard for you to deal with. You initially shared your story with me. But can you talk about the moment that you realized you had had enough and what motivated you to take control of your life?
Sure. I would love to say that I woke up one day and made that decision that enough was enough. But the universe kind of decided that for me, the universe and the court system.
Yes, we'll do that.
Yeah, it happens. My ex was arrested for soliciting a minor online. And, I'd kind of ignored all of the wake-up calls up until then. We had problems in our marriage. He definitely had some issues, put us into a crazy amount of debt. And I ignored all of those because, again, I had that story in my head that I'd die without him. And, when you come home to an evidence packet taped on your wall and find out that your husband is sitting in a jail cell somewhere waiting to be booked, suddenly you make some changes. And
was that it then? That was the catalyst?
That was it. I'm so grateful for it. And I know that sounds crazy because it was the most horrific thing that's ever happened to me and to many people. But it made me move. It made me get off my butt and stop ignoring, all of this craziness that was going on in our marriage. And it was the kick in the butt that I needed because I don't think anything else would have gotten me out of that marriage and out of that life.
I really like how you bring it back to gratitude because, I've done so many of these interviews where we all talk about saying that we're grateful for this crazy thing that's just happened to us. When you can actually get to that space of gratitude, what you're really saying is it didn't happen to you, but it happened for you. And there was such this growth that came out of that transformation transcends. It's like nothing else because you're digging so deep, right, to come out of something so painful that it fixes a lot of other things too most of the time.
It does. I mean, it shakes you completely to your core. And when your entire world crumbles underneath you, you have no choice but to rebuild.
Yeah, you have some people stay stuck for a while.
That's true.
But eventually you will rebuild. So why not just,
why not just do it?
Why not just do it?
Get it out of the way.
It's true. So now let me ask you this. What kept you from turning back around and taking him back or trying to work it out?
I think it was the realization that I was in the wrong place, living the wrong life. I don't know, maybe if our marriage had been better and stronger and I had been happier, maybe I would have tried to make it work. But it was that realization, I think right away I knew like I have been given a gift. Like I've been given an out that no one in their right mind would judge me if I left this marriage, including myself. And
Isn't that funny how you got to the word judge? It's so true. And this, I think, sometimes is why we stay in a relationship that we shouldn't stay in, is because we're worried about what other people are going to say and think about us. But I love that you did use that to propel yourself forward. Yeah.
It's so important. And just, I'm the child of divorced parents, so I swore to myself I was never going to get divorced. I was going to get married and that was going to be it. And life was going to be, perfect. And this was the one thing that could have happened that was like, I'm out.
Wow. Can I ask you this? Do you mic drop? Yeah. Do you still talk to him at all?
No. So the funny thing is I actually tried. I really did try to stay in touch with him and keep him in my life. And it wasn't the arrest. It wasn't all of that eventually caused our friendship to implode. It was him feeling entitled to money.
Ooh.
He had lived in our house without paying the mortgage while I was trying to deal with, giving up the house, never paid anything, got rent. He actually had somebody come in and get rent. And he was complaining to me one day that Wells Fargo wanted him to mow the lawn in order for them to give him the money to get out of the house. Right. And it's a much longer story, but let's just say I told him, he thought I owed some money towards this. And I tallied up all of the money that I had spent during our relationship and ending our relationship. And I was like, you know what? You just send me $14,000 and we'll call it even.
We'll call it a day. The reason I'm asking is because so many women, when they get out of, especially narcissistic relationships, I find we're stuck with some kind of debt. They try to put some debt on us, something that they've accrued or they've done, they're just something, or they walk away just feeling that entitlement to just about everything you've got, including your sanity.
Oh yeah.
So this is why I was asking, do you still talk to him, and how did that go? So that's how it went.
Nope. No. And I'm very glad. He's got 2 children now, which is frightening when you think about what his crime was.
Wow.
But yeah, that's the last time he reached out to me, was to let me know that he had a child and he didn't want me to find out some other way.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Yes, it's a girl. So, yeah. Yeah.
All right.
So, yeah. But no more contact, except creditors call me every once in a while looking for him. So he's clearly cleaned up his act.
We've all been through that. That's fun. Always fun. So now I wanted to ask, because of the nature of your situation and what was going on in his life that led to the demise of your marriage, how did you deal with the shock and the humiliation and the abandonment of the whole thing? I mean, he had another personality, didn't he, or a double life or something?
Ben and Jerry's, is that an answer?
Ice Cream City.
I ran very quickly out. This all happened in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And within a week, my address and my license plate were in the newspaper. There were news vans parked outside of my house, and I got out. I went to see my cousin for a couple of days up in Virginia until everything kind of blew over news-wise. And then my parents came out to North Carolina, and we packed up my life and my dog, and we headed out west. And I'm very grateful that I had a lot of friends that stood by me through this. From New York to even some in North Carolina, but it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing, and the one thing I will say is, if you're ever involved in something public like that, stay the heck off the internet. I read some of the comments on the articles about what he had done, and they actually attacked me.
Wow. I think that it's really easy for people to judge situations until they're actually in them, and I can imagine what you read. I can just imagine. That must have been horrifying.
It was pretty bad. Mm-hmm. But you know what? My support system was phenomenal. My parents were amazing. My friends back in New York, everybody really stepped up, and it was like, what do you need? What can we do for you? And my parents insisted that I go for therapy.
And did you go?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah, I went very regularly for about the first year.
Good.
And then on and off. But they said, you can stay with us as long as you need. That's no problem. They're like, but this has the potential to ruin you. So therapy.
Because it was so public, and it was so, this is the thing too. And I don't know if anybody can relate to what you went through specifically, because that's pretty crazy. You had to upheave your life and move to a whole new state. But going through, I will say, I feel like the topic of narcissism comes up a lot with what I do. And women who have been involved with a narcissist have crazy outlandish stories that are nuts, right? You can't wrap your head around what's going on. There always seems to be some kind of addiction attached to it, or some kind of adultery or mental health issue. There's always something attached to these narcissists that make our lives even more crazy, right? So we have to all deal with them lying about us, telling stories, rewriting history, victimizing themselves, putting us in a position of having to constantly defend ourselves. I mean, but this for you takes it to a whole other level, doesn't it?
It does. I honestly, I will give everybody except for those internet trolls credit. No one judged me to my face. If they had any issues, they didn't bring it to me. And I had a couple of people say, we knew this wasn't going to work out. We knew he wasn't the right person for you.
Wow.
But no one saw this coming.
I would love it. I've heard the same thing over and over again. I would love it if we took a stand as women for one another. And when we know someone's not right, we just say it.
Yeah.
And just come right out and just be as honest and as frank and give us reasons why.
Yeah.
And just put it out there, right? Don't you think? I hate that. I've heard that so much, since my separation, that it kind of shocks me that nobody would have said that to my face.
Yeah, like, hey, you're headed for a brick wall,
yeah, going 100 miles an hour.
Early.
Yeah. Well, maybe, what, then that makes me think too that maybe I wasn't the type of person who would have been open to hearing it.
Yeah.
So I guess we should reserve that space when we're getting into a new relationship, right?
I don't think we're ever open to hearing it, even if we came back from the future and actually told ourselves that. We're too thick-headed.
I wonder if now I would really want to know.
Yeah.
So would you, I think.
Like, hey, by the way.
Yeah.
It's one day. It's going to be a doozy.
For the next 20 years of your life. So now I find that you are completely in control of your life today. I mean, everything that you've told me about you've picked up the pieces, you've done the therapy, you've written some books. I think that you're doing absolutely amazing. So what can you say about stepping into your higher self to have accomplished all of this?
I think the biggest thing is step into your higher self and not someone else's. Mm. And I think that was one of the biggest challenges that I faced in my life is everybody has an opinion on what you should be when you grow up and what your life should look like and, what path you should follow. And while a lot of those things come from good places and people that truly care about you and want to see what's best for you, a lot of it also comes from people that haven't stepped into their higher selves. Mm-hmm. And they're, trying to live vicariously through you. And it's something you have to avoid. You have to be able to sit back and say, all of these things that I believed about myself, all of these stories I told myself, they came from somewhere. Mm-hmm. And if it's not that inner voice, if it's not that higher power, whatever you happen to believe in, it's not what you should be doing with your life.
Well, that makes me think of two things. The first thing is people will do everything they can to keep you inside of their comfort zone.
Yes.
Whether their intentions for you are good or not. I mean, most people will live inside of their own fear until someone pulls them out of that or something pulls them out of that and they learn a different way to think. Mm-hmm. But until then, they want to keep you where they feel so comfortable. And then that way you're not really putting a microscope on their own lives, right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing.
Scary. It's scary for them as well.
It's scary for them as well because they don't know what you're doing. And then the second thing I think is really important, that when you're going through such a huge transformation like this, and tell me if you agree or not, but it's really important to put your focus on somebody who has what you want. And then just keep it kind of inside of that, right? Like, I think for you, and I'm not sure entirely, I'll say for me then, starting this entrepreneurial path, everybody who knows me would agree that this is exactly where I belong. But for those people who have only known me for snippets of my life, or have only known me as a wife, or only known me as a mother, this makes them very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Right? And I get it, but I can't be listening to the things that they have to say because they don't have what I want. They don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I don't have these conversations with those people.
Yes. Yep. That's a very safe thing to say. I've had some relationships not come to an end, but trickle down to just a hey, how are you kind of situation. Really, because I made the mistake of having that conversation of I'm embarking on this journey and I'm growing, and it did not go well.
Well, because you're growing and you're also going to make mistakes. And for people who need you to stay inside of their comfort zone, the mistakes you make are crazy for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I get it. You know, they don't want to see us fail, but they're also scared because they never took that leap.
That's it.
So.
Yeah, that's it. They stayed inside of their fear, I suppose. Yeah.
You just surround yourself with people that are awesome and support you and are like, yep, do it, jump.
And who want to push you to be your best self, and also people who you can admire. You know, I always go back to something that was said to me, you know, when I was a kid. I must have been like 14 or 15 years old and still finding my way. And someone said to me, I'm going to butcher this quote, but they said, if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
Yes.
Yeah, is that the quote? And so I've kind of stuck with that my whole entire life. Like have become, I'd say for the better part of the last, 20 years of my life, I really am in the seeking and learning and curious place, you know? So everybody I talk to, I want to know something deeper and more meaningful.
Right.
Like everybody.
Yeah, you start connecting on a different level too.
Yeah,
especially when you open up about the trauma that you've been through and whatever experiences you've had. It gives other people the opportunity to open up and that space to be vulnerable.
Is this easy for you to talk about, the things that you've been through?
It is. It is now. It's funny. It doesn't seem like it really happened. It really doesn't. I mean, I can look up the newspaper articles at any time and, you know, prove to myself that it happened, but I'm such a different person and my life is so incredibly different at this point that I'm like, that couldn't have possibly happened. Mm-hmm. And, you know, again, with those stories, like I have that story running through my head of this is what happened. And I'm like, is that really? Like, did that?
Isn't that something?
It's so crazy.
It starts to look like somebody else's life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like another life, another world kind of situation. So I'm detached from it to some degree at this point. But every once in a while, something will pop up and, you know, just kind of brings me back to that space for a couple of minutes. And
then you go clean it off.
Yeah.
I find that this is where the shame comes in too. When something happens to us that we have a hard time processing or we're no longer fitting into society as the identity that we once had, the shame of it comes in. And I think that it's really difficult for people to talk about what happened to them. I was the same. I mean, I grew up in foster care. I was a street kid for a while. I created a physical and a mental persona that was so different than someone who would have that life so that nobody could look at me and ever know that that was my story. Right. I was so attached to that story, you know, so being a storyteller, I'm sure that you could have, I'm sure you have something to say on not attaching yourself to the story and being free of it. And to me, it's in talking about it and sharing it. What do you think about that?
I think the more you talk about something, okay, so this is weird because I think there's a positive and a negative to this.
Okay.
I think the more you talk about something, the positive is that you can let it go. You can kind of free up that space and be like, you know what, this happened, but I guess taking a few steps away from it and looking down on that situation, like, okay, that happened. That's one way to handle it. And the other one is to get stuck in it and to keep kind of ruminating on this story and, oh, this happened. And, oh, you know, kind of this spiral of, I don't even know what to call it, depression, you know, the spiral of like that you can't get out and you just keep repeating it and you keep reliving it and bringing those emotions up. And I think we have that choice to kind of separate ourselves from the situation and heal, or to stay stuck in that and just continue to relive it and relive the pain.
Wow. And who wants to do that, right?
It's not
actually a lot of people want to do that, and this is why we get stuck. And that spiral of depression for me is this revolving door, of conversations that we had, and I should have said this, or I should have done that, and look what he did to me, or look what he did to my life. All of that, this is all a choice. This is what you're saying. Yeah.
That was one of the most important things that I read during my divorce. And I don't remember where it came from because I read pretty much every self-help book out there. But one of them said that the day, what was it? The day you stop calling yourself a victim is the day you can heal. They said it much better. Much better. I don't know why it's not coming to me because I talk about it all the time when I'm on stage.
That's funny. But I interviewed someone who said, in the exact vein of what you're saying, he said, we have been victimized, but we are not a victim.
Oh, I like that.
I like that too, right? Isn't that great? That's a very liberating thought. Something has happened in our life that has, spiraled us out of control, or that we've taken, hold of and let it spiral us out of control. But we don't have to do that. We were victimized, but we are not a victim.
Right. And when you take responsibility for what's happened to you, like it's not necessarily your fault that it happened, but when you take responsibility for it, then you can say, this is not going to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
So
and responsibility means why you put yourself in that situation to begin with.
Exactly. And that's what I wanted to talk to. I had a therapist that kept bringing me back to the divorce itself and kept, well, how did this feel and all that? And I was like, we need to stop talking about this because it happened. I want to go back and figure out why I brought this weirdo into my life in the first place.
Yes.
And how to never do it again. So
yeah, that's so important, and this is why I think it's essential to not get into a new relationship inside of at least a year when you're getting out of something crazy and traumatic. At least a year. All of us have, right? Because we need, there's a whole bunch of needs that have not been met, that you feel like that is what everything is all about. So you kind of rush to feel like a woman, to feel desirable, to feel loved, to, like you want all of these things that you didn't get, or that now you're lacking. So yeah, I can see the draw to it. I made the same mistake myself. Yeah. but the importance of it looking back is, oh my God, there's so much more important things to do than find a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Right?
I had a date the day my divorce papers came back signed. I literally got my divorce papers, had a good cry with my dad, put my makeup on, and went out to meet somebody at a Mexican restaurant. And we dated for 9 months, and I broke him.
Oh, no.
I know. Honestly, if I have any regrets in my life, that's it. Because I was not in the space to be able to handle it. And he was such a sweet guy. And the day he was going to ask me to move in with him, I broke up with him.
Wow. So, you weren't in a space for that, right?
Yeah, it was just not good. And, you drag other people into your craziness. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, it's true. There's just so much work that needs to be done, especially when we've, like you said before, what did I do to attract this into my life?
Right.
We need to work around what we did to make sure that doesn't happen again, just like you said, because you'll either do one of two things. You'll go down a road and you'll end up being, this bad, or I don't want to say bad, but this negative thing for somebody else, or you're going to attract the same kind of man back into your life again.
Yeah.
Yeah. We do a lot of work around this.
If he's listening, I'm sorry. Not that he was listening to a podcast on divorce, but that's okay.
You never know. That was a nice shout out. Okay, so now, aside from what you've already said, what advice do you have for our audience who are going through the shock and the pain of facing a whole new world, a new identity and dreams that feel so out of reach?
The first thing I would say, and this I know sounds a little bit counterintuitive to everything else, but take some time to grieve. That's, I think, the one thing that I didn't do. And that will come back to bite you in the butt. There's 5 stages of grief. And the first, you kind of have to accept that this has happened and be sad. It's okay to be sad for a while, and it's okay to feel really bad about your life. That sounds so that's awful advice. But if you don't deal with those feelings, they will come back, and they will come back in a future relationship or at the most inopportune time in your life.
Yeah.
So I think taking that time to kind of lick your wounds and not jumping right into this is a good thing, this is wonderful. And it may be, and it is, but take the time to be sad is the first thing I would say. And then after that, get out and go do something for someone else.
Yes. Oh, I love that advice.
That's my rallying cry. Animal rescue saved my life. I was in a really bad depression, and my stepmom dragged me off the bathroom floor and said, go do something for someone else.
Isn't that powerful? I think that I say this all the time. I love that you just brought it back to that, because in my own world, it was so funny. I don't know if I shared this with you, but when I ended up having to drop out of high school because I was trying to still go to school. I had nowhere to live. It was really difficult, and I did it for so many years. But one of the things that, on my exit, my exit interview with my guidance counselor, he gave me a Psych 101 textbook. And he was like, read this. I really want you to read this. And I was like, I'm not reading that. What do I need that for? So I moved into this apartment all by myself. I had my very first apartment, and I think I was 16 years old, and I had no furniture but a little table, a pink ghetto blaster. And on this table sat this psychology textbook, and I had no dishes or anything. I was always eating out. I didn't know how to cook. I know, it's so sad. But I didn't have a TV either, but I was sitting there eating my food on the kitchen floor, and this textbook was like sort of calling to me. So I opened up the textbook and I start reading it, and I read it literally from cover to cover because I didn't really understand what I was reading, like what order to put it in really. But I found that as soon as I was reading something, all of a sudden somebody would find their way into my life that needed to know the information that I just learned. So it was really interesting how I was manifesting this. I didn't even understand what any of that stuff was, but putting the focus now on somebody else's problem and giving them this information was so powerful to my healing and my recovery. And it's why I think I can get through things very quickly now. Yeah. So I love that you just said that. That's fantastic. And so now you're really heavily involved in animal rescue, aren't you?
I am. Like I said, they saved my life, and I'll spend the rest of mine paying that favor back. I do. Whenever I've had low points in my life, like, animals have always been there. And not just that, but the skills, the family, the friends, rescue has literally changed my life. I found out that I had, abilities that I never knew. I got jobs because of connections I made through rescue. It changed the course of my life.
Wow.
So there's always going to be other things that I do because I have my hand in 19 different things at a time. But it always comes back to rescue. That's really like my underlying why.
Oh, I love that, Sheryl. Yeah. That's really sweet. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us today. I want to now take the conversation over to your free gift. So the book that you wrote called Surviving to Thriving, you want to give away the first chapter, yeah?
I do. Okay, and you know what? I say this in the first chapter. We all already have the skills that we need to survive pretty much anything, but we forget. When we're in that dark place, we push away the people that are there for us. We don't see the people that are there for us. We forget all of those tools that we've learned throughout our lives. And this book is that reminder that you need. It's that, how to take all of these things that you can already accomplish, and how do you put them into practice, and how do you actually get through those dark times? And I think no matter what you're going through, you need that reminder. And I needed that reminder, and I needed to read every single self-help book on the planet. And this is a compilation of those books, and I have a background in psychology as well, and all of my experiences. And I just want it to help people.
Yeah.
I just want them to know that there's someone there, and there's a way out of whatever you're going through.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you very much for that. I think that's lovely. And for everyone who's listening, I will put a link to Sheryl's PDF of her first chapter for you in the show notes. So I want to say thank you again, Sheryl, so much for being here. This is awesome. I really love that we finally got a chance to do this.
I'm excited.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's listening. You're listening to Thriving After Divorce Radio. I am your host, Tanya Marie Dubé, and we will see you next week. Thank you again so much for joining us on the Thriving After Divorce Radio podcast. We're coming to you every Monday morning so that you can start your week with intention and some powerful advice for what you're dealing with. So please subscribe to this podcast and share it with your friends and your family. My goal is to help change 1 million lives with this work, because when you teach a woman, you teach an entire community. Everybody benefits and the love spreads. So please feel free to comment, review, share, and like. With your help, I know I can reach this goal. So have a beautiful day, and we will see you next week.